Order, order. We come to questions to Secretary of State for the Home Department. Lee Anderson.
Number 1, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I respond to the first question, I want to simply say that I know the whole House will be very concerned at the extremely serious incident that has taken place in Southport. All of our thoughts will be with the family and loved ones of those who are affected. I have been in contact with the Merseyside Police and Crime Commissioner and the Merseyside Mayor to convey my support to the police and our thanks to the police and emergency services for their swift and courageous response. The response to this awful incident is currently unfolding, and the House and the public will be updated in due course.
Lee Anderson.
The first question, apologies, Mr. Speaker. Small boat crossings undermine our border security and put lives at risk, and criminal gangs are profiting from this trade in human lives. That is why we are establishing a new border security command with additional cross-border police and new counter-terror powers.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now then, 6 boats came over the Channel on Saturday. There's been reports of another 4 today. That's over 500 illegal migrants being escorted into our waters by the French authorities. Does the Home Secretary agree with me? It's time now to stop paying the French any more money until they stop being complicit in this evil trade.
Yeah.
Well, the honourable member will note that these boat crossings are extremely dangerous, and a woman died in the Channel again yesterday, and criminal gangs are deliberately cramming boats to maximise their profits, and they have been getting away with it for far too long. That is why we need the new Border Security Command in place, but it is also why we need to work not simply with the French police, but also with police forces and organisations right across Europe and beyond in order to pursue the gangs and to prevent the boats reaching the French coast in the first place.
Chris Murray.
The thing about borders is that they have 2 sides, and the best way to secure it is to have a constructive relationship with the person you share it with. What steps will the Home Secretary be taking to reach out to France and Belgium to secure the border?
Well, my honourable friend is right that we need to strengthen the work to prevent the gangs managing to pursue this vile trade in people. That is why we have immediately strengthened the UK presence in Europol and in the operational task forces that go after the gangs, and we are already in touch with leaders in France, in Italy and right across Europe so that we can strengthen that cooperation, because the gangs are getting away with it and lives are being put at risk as a result.
Shadow Minister Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, may I start by extending my support to the Home Secretary for whatever incident is going on in Southport, and the support that we will offer the Mersey Police for the incidents that we are sadly seeing in Merseyside today. And now may I come back to a point that the Right Honourable Lady raised earlier this month, when she refused to rule out the UK accepting migrants from European countries in exchange for a returns deal with Europe. Does she accept that under any deal that she were to do, some of those sent to the United Kingdom from the European Union could harbour extremist ideologies or pose a security threat? And will she commit to ensuring that there are strong safeguards, including a right of refusal on a case-by-case basis, to stop anyone who could put Britain's security at risk from entering this country?
There need always to be proper safeguards on security, proper security checks on those who come to this country. But the problem with the boat crossings that we have seen is that they are undermining that border security. There are no checks on dangerous boat crossings and on who the criminal gangs are choosing to put into boats. And it is also dangerous and puts lives at risk. That is why we are clear not only that we need to have stronger border security, it's why we're setting up a new border security Command with counter-terror powers as well, which will be in our new legislation. But we also recognise that the returns, for example, of failed asylum seekers have dropped substantially since the last Labour government was in place. We have to turn that round. We want to increase returns as well.
Josh Fenton-Glynn.
Question number 2, Mr. Speaker.
I thank my honourable friend for this question. For far too long, violence against women and girls has been treated as an inevitability rather than the national emergency that it is. Our mission is one for the whole country, to halve violence against women and girls within a decade. That has to start with drastically improving the policing and criminal justice response.
I think the group term secretary.
Oh, with permission, Mr. Speaker. It's a long time since I have done this. Can I group this with questions 3, 5, 12, 19, 22 and 23 and 24?
Fenton-Glynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am proud to support this government's mission to halve violence against women and girls. I know from my time as a councillor that the experience of victims is made much better if the police empathise with them. Would my right honourable friend agree to have a look at some of the work done by Alison, the Deputy Mayor of West Yorkshire, on connecting survivors with police in order to make sure that they're more empathetic in how they deal with these awful crimes? Thank you.
Well, as a West Yorkshire MP, can I join with my honourable friend in paying tribute to the work that's been done, not just by the Deputy Mayor for West Yorkshire, but also by the Mayor and by the Chief Constable, who have been looking at different ways to improve both women's safety on the streets and also at ways to speed up charging for domestic abuse. The charge rates for domestic abuse have dropped by around 40% over the last 8 years across the country. That has to be turned around because we need to see justice for these terrible crimes.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, I welcome the Home Secretary's comment, particularly in light of the National Police Chief's report that 1 in 12 women in this country will be victims of a violent crime by a man. But while police action is necessary, would she agree with me that this is a whole government and whole society problem? We have to look at societal change, we have to look at education, we have to look at health education, and we have to look at misogyny in the round, because it's more than just violence. It happens to women every day in the most everyday of circumstances.
Well, I agree with the honourable member that this has to be a broad mission. That's why the Prime Minister has talked about this as being a part of a mission, not just for government, not just for any individual department. We will work cross-government on it, but it also has to be about society as a whole. It's also why the Education Secretary has talked about tackling toxic misogyny in schools as well.
Alison Hume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the steps my right honourable friend is taking to reduce violence against women and girls. Women's refuges and other dispersed accommodation play a vital part in helping women and their children escape domestic abuse. Scarborough has the highest domestic abuse rate in North Yorkshire, but we don't have a single refuge in the whole constituency of Scarborough and Whitby. Planning permission for a women's refuge at Danesdyke was granted in 2022, but progress has stalled due to rising business costs. Can the Home Secretary please advise how the shortfall in funds referenced by North Yorkshire Council, Beyond Housing and Homes England, may be met so this vital service can be built?
Well, my honourable friend is right to point out the really important work that is done by refugees, but also by all kinds of different voluntary sector groups that do immensely important work supporting victims, providing specialist advice as well. We do have to recognise that the funding has been hit for local council services. It's one of the issues that will be covered by my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, in her statement in due course. But we also, I think, want to see work done in every community across the country as part of this mission, so that we make sure that we get the best impact from every pound there is in order to be able to support women and girls against violence and abuse.
Elsie Blundell.
Mr. Speaker, my constituency carries painful scars from a time when vulnerable girls were subjected to abuse and exploitation. But across the country, it is not just so-called grooming gangs that present a danger to girls. Abuse happens online, in institutions and in the home. What measures will the new government put in place to target perpetrators and to address the root causes of abuse and violence to ensure that what happened to vulnerable girls in my constituency can never happen again?
My honourable friend makes an immensely important point. She is a strong voice for victims of the most terrible abuse and violence. And I think we need to make sure that victims get support, but also that action is taken against perpetrators, because too often the focus is on the 2 weeks support for perpetrators, 2 weeks support for victims, but actually no proper action being strong enough to go after the perpetrators and make sure they face justice for their terrible crimes. So we will be setting out a new perpetrators programme to properly make sure that the police are pursuing the most dangerous offenders of violence against women and girls. That is the best way to make sure everyone can stay safe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The situation facing specialist charities is acute. Many local services have had to close their doors due to lack of funding, including, sadly, Suffolk Rape Crisis. Long-term sustainable funding is crucial if women are to be supported after abuse and kept safe from future harm. Can my right honourable friend confirm that Labour's mission will include a review of the funding for these life-saving services?
Well, our mission needs to be comprehensive, and it needs to involve every local area and every local community, not just the work that government does. What we want to see is strong partnerships in every area across the country, focusing around both how to prevent violence against women and girls and also how to make sure that victims get support and how to pursue perpetrators. We are keen to work closely with the voluntary sector, with third sector organisations and refuges in order to make sure we do this.
Catherine Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There were nearly 400 offences of violence against women and girls in Derby in 2022-23, shamefully a fifth of all crimes in the city. And while I welcome the £83,000 for CCTV that will be implemented by our new Derbyshire Police and Crime Commissioner, what further support can this government provide so that women feel safe and are safe in our city centres?
I agree with my honourable friend about the importance of this, as well as the work we'll be doing specifically to target violence against women and girls. This government is also determined to increase neighbourhood policing, to get police back onto the streets, to make sure that people can feel safe. We've lost around 10,000 neighbourhood police and PCSOs in the last 8 years. We need to turn that around so that everyone can feel safe on our streets.
Elsie Gilbert.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask my right honourable friend how she'll work with the devolved nations to make sure that we meet these targets as well, please?
Again, my honourable friend makes an important point, because this, the mission needs to be right across the UK, that this is something we address in all corners of our country, and also that we work in partnership and also learn from things that have worked or things that frankly haven't worked in order to keep women safe, and we will continue to do that.
Rebecca Smith.
The Right Honourable Lady may be aware of the Plymouth Male Violence Against Women and Girls report and recommendations, which was established to help the city, including part of my South West Devon constituency, to rebuild following 2 violent tragedies in 2021. However, our belief has always been that our recommendations could form a blueprint for how other towns and cities across the country could address violence against women and girls. Will the Right Honourable Lady agree to meet with me to discuss how we might be able to work together on this?
The Honourable Member makes an important point, and I have heard over many years and talked to Plymouth MPs about the terrible incident that Plymouth had to endure and the impact that had on the community, but also the importance of learning lessons from what happened in order to prevent future violence. We will continue to work with Plymouth, and I'm sure the Violence Against Women and Girls Minister, Safeguarding Minister, will also be happy to talk further with her about this. We need to make sure we have both prevention and also a strong and robust response from law enforcement too.
Caroline Bowden.
Thank you. I applaud the new government's mission to halve violence against women and girls. In my previous role as the Chief Executive of Devon Rape Crisis, I learnt how insidious the widespread access to pornography is amongst our children and young people, and how damaging that is to both boys and girls. So I would like to ask the Minister whether she can assure me that the Ministry of Education will be involved in this mission with a widespread programme of education in all schools across the country about how dangerous pornography is. And if I may ask whether she will commit to working with internet companies to further tighten up the safeguards so that there can be a fail-safe mechanism so that our young people cannot access this vile pornography. Thank you.
Well, the honourable member may know that a review on pornography was established under the last Conservative government, and that is due to report in the autumn, and we look forward to its conclusions. And that, I think, is an opportunity to say that we will work with anyone on tackling violence against women and girls. I do think that far too little has been done for too long. I do think that the legacy that we have inherited is far too damaged. However, we want to pull everyone together to tackle this terrible crime.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Home Secretary agree with me that it is shocking when we have violence against female emergency workers, and how committed is she to ensure that they face the full weight of the law?
Yeah.
Women have to have the protection of the law wherever they face violence. That includes women emergency service workers, it includes women police officers, it includes women shop workers who also face violence in their job. It's one of the reasons why we are strengthening the law on assaults against shop workers, which particularly affects women at work, and why we need to see stronger action in policing, because too often violence against women and girls has been seen as an inevitability rather than a national emergency where we need much stronger action in place.
Neera Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next month, the local community in Twickenham will sadly once again be remembering Amélie de Lagrange, the French student who was brutally murdered, as many members will remember, on Twickenham Green some 20 years ago. Sadly, so little has changed since then. A local survey of Richmond and Kingston Youth Council found that 69% of boys said they wouldn't or would be unsure about intervening if they witnessed friends sexually harassing someone. So could I reiterate calls from both sides to work with the Department for Education to make sure that boys as well as girls are learning about what is and isn't acceptable?
Secretary. The honourable member is right that this needs to start early and needs to start young, and this is a strong personal commitment from the Education Secretary that we start in schools, we start throughout life to make sure that young men growing up understand the importance of challenging misogyny, and they understand the importance of standing firm against violence against women and girls of all sorts. She refers to awful cases from the past, and she's right that for too long we have seen these cases and nothing has changed since. We cannot let that go on. This has to be a moment. This has to be a moment for change. It is an opportunity for all of us to come together to make sure that happens.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Home Secretary very much for positive and answers to all the questions that have been put forward. The 2023 University of Ulster research shows an eye-watering 98% of women in Northern Ireland have experienced at least one form of abuse in their lifetime. Between 2017 and 2021, 35 women and girls were killed and murdered. Levels of violence unprecedented across this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So what discussions will the Home Secretary have with the Justice Minister back home in releasing the abuse strategies for Northern Ireland? Thank you so much.
The honourable member is right to raise this. It affects us in all corners of the United Kingdom, and we are keen to work in partnership everywhere and anywhere to tackle these appalling crimes. The truly awful thing is sometimes when there is a terrible murder and the case is looked into and the authorities come to the same conclusions. There were things that could have been done in order to prevent the abuse, in order to prevent the terrible murders or terrible crimes taking place. We have to make sure those lessons actually are learnt from, and we don't just have a Groundhog Day of making the same mistakes again and again.
Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, I welcome the Right Honourable Lady to her place. I welcome her government's commitment to halving violence against women and girls. It is an incredibly important agenda, and it builds upon the work that the previous government, my government, put forward in this area. It remains a long-standing priority for me, and I'm very proud that as Foreign Secretary I led the International Women and Girls strategy, which meant that this was addressed internationally and not just domestically, and her desire to halve the incidence of violence against women and girls, I think, fits neatly with my aspiration at the time to make the United Kingdom the safest place in the world to be a woman or a girl. We've seen an increase in arrest rates for violence against women and girls, up by 25% between years 2019-20 and 22-23, and a 38% increase in charge rates for rape over the year-to-year period. But we recognise there is significant and regular underreporting of violence against women and girls, and I want to make sure that her agenda doesn't inadvertently dissuade women from coming forward. So what specifically will be the metric by which we can measure this halving of violence against women and girls?
So the Shadow Home Secretary makes an important point that we need to be addressing the prevalence of violence against women and girls, not simply the reporting, because there are many areas where we know that reporting needs to increase because very often there is under-reporting, and we have work underway at the moment in order to ensure that that can be measured. The thing I though would just say to him is, when he talked about the increase in charge rates, if you increase a very, very small number by a little bit, it's still a very small number. The charge rate is still way, way too low, and the prosecutions and convictions for domestic abuse are over 40% lower. That's in terms of the total number of prosecutions, over 40% lower than they were 8 years ago. So this needs a major overhaul of the system. I look forward to working with his party and to working with all parties in order to do this. But we have to be very honest with ourselves about the damage that has been done.
Jess.
Question 4, Mr. Speaker.
Can I, first of all, thank my honourable friend for this question, and we are determined to stamp out the scourge of serious youth violence and have set out an unprecedented mission to halve knife crime within a decade. We'll introduce legislation to remove dangerous knives from our streets and tackle online knife sales through new sanctions for tech executives whose companies fail to obey the law. And our New Futures programme will prevent teenagers from being drawn into violence by bringing services together around them to ensure that they stay on the right path.
Jess.
Mr. Speaker, my constituency of Wolverhampton West is in the West Midlands, which sadly has been described as the knife crime capital of the United Kingdom. Only last September, 16-year-old Terrell Marshall Williams lost his life when he was stabbed to death with a so-called Rambo knife. And in March this year, 17-year-old Harley Hepworth was stabbed to death in a park. When we were previously in government, we used to have a slogan, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. Given that issues such as drug abuse, lack of access to adequate mental health services and cuts to community provisions such as youth centres are considered to be causes of youth crime, how will my right honourable friend's department use initiatives such as the Young Futures programme to not only tackle youth violence but the causes of youth violence?
Well, first of all, I'd like to offer my condolences to the families of my right honourable friend's constituents who've so tragically lost their lives. And tackling serious violence and halving knife crime is a core part of our Safer Streets mission. And to be successful, it will require action across Whitehall and with all partners, including police, probation, youth services, tech companies, charities and community organisations. And as my honourable friend has said, the preventative part of this through our Young Futures programme with the Young Futures hubs will be staffed by a range of trained professionals to support young people and help prevent them from being drawn into violence.
Question number 6, please, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last government lost control of the asylum system, and that's meant sky-high asylum accommodation costs, but also too many cases where people have fallen through the net and ended up destitute, adding to the already high burden local authorities have to deal with. This government will get a grip. We've already set out plans to process asylum claims that have been stuck in record-high asylum backlog cases, and have given assurances to the Secretary of State for Housing and local government that we will take action to reset the relationship between the Home Office and local authorities.
Calder.
Mr. Speaker, no recourse to public funds is a policy that prevents most migrants in the UK from accessing most forms of welfare support. To reduce child poverty and homelessness, I would like to see it scrapped altogether, but at the very least, will the Minister cease applying no recourse to public funds to the visas of any parents of children under 18 to ensure that children can be adequately protected against poverty and destitution?
No. The best way to deal with the issue of destitution, in my view, is to decide asylum claims quickly and accurately so that those who are entitled to can work and have such recourse, and those who are not can be swiftly removed.
Jack Abbott.
Question 7, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Levels of violence and abuse towards retail workers are unacceptably high, with a shoplifting epidemic plaguing our high streets across the country. That's why this government will bring in a new offence of assaulting a retail worker and end the effective immunity for shoplifting of goods below £200. Unlike the party opposite, we want to send a message that all shoplifting is illegal and that offenders will not escape punishment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, record rates of retail crime and shoplifting are a blight on our high streets, including ours in Ipswich, where too often such instances act as a flashpoint for completely unacceptable levels of violence, threats and abuse directed towards retail workers themselves. I very much welcome the Government's commitment to ending the £200 threshold for prosecuting shoplifters and the introduction of a standalone offence that will give shop workers the protection they need. Will the Minister join me in Ipswich to meet with local retail staff so she can hear about their experiences and the vital difference these steps will make?
I commend the Honourable Member for raising this issue, and it's also true that the steps we are taking owe much to the work of USDOR, the Co-op, the British Retail Consortium and the ACS, and indeed everyone has a right to feel safe at work. Indeed, with the March statistics having shown an increase in shoplifting offences, many of which are violent, of 30% over 12 months, we welcome also the operational commitments made by the police in the Retail Crime Action Plan. I know that my right honourable friend, the member for Kingston upon Hull North, has heard his request, and that I know she would be happy to visit with him.
Shadow Minister Matt Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a backbencher and chair of the APPG on retail, I campaigned alongside retailers and the likes of USDOR to up the ante on protecting retail workers. I know that retail workers welcomed this party's action on the Retail Crime Action Plan, and particularly the use of tagging and facial recognition technology. Can my right honourable friend assure us that there'll be no let-up in the use of facial recognition and tagging to clamp down on this and other crimes?
I thank the Honourable Member, the Shadow Minister, for his question, and I can confirm that we are continuing to look at this, and indeed that we welcome the operational commitments that have been made by the police in the October 2023 Retail Crime Action Plan, and indeed the commitment for police across England and Wales to prioritise attendance where violence has been used towards shop staff.
Whistle.
Number 8, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to group question 8 with questions 13, 15, 16 and 17. Antisocial behaviour is blighting high streets and town centres right across the country, and our communities are paying the price. That's why this government has made tackling it a top priority. We will restore neighbourhood policing, putting bobbies back on the beat in every corner of the country, and we will reintroduce new respect orders so the police can get repeat offenders off our streets.
Ruth Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Antisocial behaviour is one of the most common issues raised by my constituents in Bolton North East. Can the Minister assure me and my constituents that her department will be taking clear steps to tackle the issue head-on?
Yeah.
Absolutely, and we've been very clear that we see neighbourhood policing as the bedrock of restoring that public confidence in policing, with the neighbourhood policing guarantee being a crucial part of that. And in particular, I wanted to give the example of the police having powers to crack down on the antisocial use of dangerous and deafening off-road bikes, which causes much concern in many of our constituencies, so they can be seized and destroyed far more swiftly.
Alex Bruce-Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for that answer, and I'd also like to associate myself with the comments of the Home Secretary in respect of Southport. During the election, my constituents in Cardiff West raised the issue of antisocial behaviour repeatedly. I know they will be grateful for the Minister's answer, but I wonder if she can assure me that this government will work closely with South Wales Police and with our new Police and Crime Commissioner, Emma Walls, to deliver on this vital mission.
Yes, absolutely. As I said in my opening answer, this is a priority for the government to actually tackle the scourge of antisocial behaviour. And we know that the police and local authorities do have a range of powers to deal with antisocial behaviour, which we're going to strengthen through new legislation.
Lawrence Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Crime and antisocial behaviour was the #1 issue on the doorstep during the election, and my constituents in Birmingham, Northfield, are paying the price for years of cuts to community services and neighbourhood policing. Figures released last week show that there was a 10% fall in recorded crime in Birmingham last year, but the number of shoplifting reports was up by a third. Will the Minister arrange a meeting with me, Simon Foster, the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner, and Birmingham City Council to discuss how respect orders and other measures can reduce the crime and antisocial behaviour that is blighting our communities?
The honourable member is absolutely right about this being one of the top issues on the doorstep during the general election. And I think it's worth reflecting on the fact that the powers in the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014 actually weakened the response to antisocial behaviour, and for far too long the Conservatives wrote this off as just low-level crime. That's why we're introducing respect orders, stronger powers for the police to tackle persistent antisocial behaviour offenders and to get them out of our town centres. And of course I'd be very happy to meet with the honourable gentleman to discuss this issue.
Ingham. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Residents in the Highfields area of Stafford have expressed concern around off-road vehicles being used in pedestrian areas. People, especially the elderly and vulnerable, have reported feeling intimidated and concerned for their safety and for the safety of others. Could the Minister please tell me what the new government have planned to tackle this issue?
I'm very aware of this issue, and as I said in an earlier response, we want to make sure that there is swift action to deal with this. We think the neighbourhood policing guarantee, getting police officers back onto the beat to see what's going on, provide that reassurance and to stop some of this antisocial behaviour is a key thing that we will be making sure happens. But I'm very happy to discuss this with the Honourable Lady as well.
Joe Platt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I welcome my right honourable friend and her team to their place, and can I thank the Home Secretary for visiting Lee prior to the election to acknowledge the issues that we face in our towns. So, as my right honourable friend knows, our town centres are struggling with persistent ASB, often fuelled by drugs and alcohol abuse. So this is placing a significant strain on our police force, deterring residents from visiting the towns and causing unease in the business community. So I welcome the Home Secretary's measures for more policing, but in fear of just moving the problem along, can my right honourable friend outline the potential for collaboration between support agencies to better manage the complex nature of these offences?
Can I thank my honourable friend and say how nice it is to see her back in her place in this House. And of course, collaboration is key to how we're going to tackle antisocial behaviour. In line with our manifesto, as I've said, we're going to introduce the powerful new respect orders, giving the police the greater powers to get persistent social offenders off our streets. And we will introduce zero tolerance zones through a form of expedited public space protection orders to prevent things like antisocial street drinking or local drug dealing from blighting particular areas.
Shadow Minister Matt Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At Manchester Airport this week, we've seen how antisocial behaviour can quickly spiral into very serious violence. We've also seen our police officers can become subject to trial by social media with only partial information. The last government brought forward the use of force review to give police the clarity and confidence to act in the most challenging of circumstances. Can the Right Honourable Lady assure us that she'll continue this important work and assure this House that they will stand on the side of our brave officers?
Could I just say to the Shadow Policing Minister that one of the incidents he's referring to is clearly still under consideration by the IOPC. I think it would be wrong for me to make any further comment on that at this time. Of course, the police have our backing in the difficult job that they have to do, particularly around antisocial behaviour, and we will, of course, do what we can to support the police when they need that support.
Spokesperson Jamie Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Minister has said, the physical presence of police officers is crucial to tackling antisocial behaviour, coppers on the beat. But the fact is that during recent years, we've seen the number of police officers in the Highlands of Scotland decline hugely. This is extremely worrying and it does nothing for public confidence in the police force. Now, I know that policing is devolved to the Scottish Government, but can I, with some passion, ask the Minister what advice does she have for me as a Scottish member?
Well, I'm sure the honourable gentleman doesn't need advice from me. He's quite clear this is a devolved matter. It's an issue that he needs to obviously take up with the Scottish Government and with Police Scotland. But what I would say to him is that what we recognise as the incoming new government is that issues around having enough police on the beat, the visibility is so important to the public feeling safe. That reassurance is so vital. So perhaps he'd like to take that up with the Scottish Government and Police Scotland.
Kim Johnson.
Question number 9, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the honourable member for her question? Facial recognition technology is being used effectively by police forces to identify suspects more quickly and accurately. But of course, it is essential that any new technologies are accompanied by strong safeguards and underpinned by a robust legal framework. And this government will give careful consideration to the overall impacts of all new policing technology.
Kim Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the response from my honourable friend, but facial recognition technology is being used by the police in publicly accessible places, and it does breach human rights and it does discriminate disproportionately against black people. The previous government failed to introduce legislation to restrict its use. So can my right honourable friend confirm when there will be legislation to protect us? And will my right honourable friend meet with me and representatives of civil liberty organisations to discuss this matter further?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand that the National Physical Laboratory has independently tested the algorithms police have been using in live facial recognition cases and has found them to be highly accurate. They found no statistically significant differences based on ethnicity at the settings that the police generally use. But it is extremely important that any new technology used by the police is accompanied by strong safeguards, including to prevent bias or disproportionality, and that a robust legal framework is in place to govern the use of these new technologies. If she still has concerns, I'm sure the Police Minister or myself would be happy to meet with her.
Orla Kirk-Smith.
Question 10, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I'd like to group this question with question 11. We inherited, after 14 years of Conservative chaos, an asylum system which just doesn't work but costs billions of pounds. We are determined to restore order to the asylum system so that it operates swiftly, firmly and fairly. additional caseworkers will be used to clear the backlog of claims and appeals while properly enforcing the rules and ensuring that those with no right to be here are swiftly removed.
Laura Clark-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the efforts that my honourable friend has outlined. As the backlog is cleared, what steps will the Home Secretary take to ensure that newly recognised refugees do not face homelessness and destitution in the weeks after being granted status? And specifically, will the Home Secretary consider extending the move-on period to 56 days in line with the Homelessness Reduction Act?
Mr. Speaker, the Government is aware of the need for a smooth transition between asylum accommodation and other accommodation for those asylum seekers who are granted leave to remain. We understand this issue and we are considering it.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to a 2022 YouGov poll, 81% of people support the right of asylum seekers to work. Currently, successful asylum seekers have little choice but to present as homeless to their local authorities, as they have no way of saving a deposit or proving an income to a potential landlord. Some councils, like Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, where I was formerly the leader, have joined the Lift the Ban coalition and support the right for people to work after 6 months. I accept that the Minister has talked about speeding things up, but currently 2/3 of the asylum seekers are taking more than 6 months. It will take some time to do that. Doing so will reduce the homelessness burden on councils, improve the mental health of asylum seekers, integrate with the host authority, and also fill vacancies in our economy. Would the Minister consider working with Refugee Action to consider this?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. No, the answer to this question is to speed up the asylum system so that we can get through to proper results in that system much, much faster and swiftly remove those who don't have a right to be here, whilst ensuring that those who do can be integrated and begin to work.
Melanie Ward.
Question number 14, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It will always be a government priority to protect our elections against foreign interference. Established processes are in place to protect the UK's democratic integrity, including the National Security Act of 2023, providing the security services and our law enforcement agencies with the tools they need to tackle state threats. Last week, the Home Secretary and myself convened the Defending Democracy Task Force to consider any issues arising from the election.
Melanie Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In terms of issues in our recent general election, some of my constituents in Cowdenbeath and Kirkcaldy were understandably frustrated by delays in the postal voting system. I understand the Electoral Commission is looking into this and hope lessons will be learned. Our democratic system must always be protected from both domestic and foreign malign interference, including misinformation. So can the Minister update the House on the work being undertaken by the Defending Democracy Task Force, which he just referred to review measures put in place to protect the general election, and also explain what efforts are being made to protect our wider democratic system?
Thank you. I'm grateful to the honourable member for her question and I welcome her to her place. The Defending Democracy Task Force met for the first time under the new government on the 25th of July. The task force brings together ministers from right across government along with representatives from law enforcement and the intelligence community. Last week's meeting discussed how political intimidation and harassment has no place in our society and how the task force will drive the whole of government response to the full range of threats to our democracy. The Defending Democracy Task Force will bring to bear the full range of tools and capabilities to meet this challenge.
Sir Julian Lewis.
I warmly welcome the appointment of the Minister and congratulate him on it. Like me, he will appreciate that the security and intelligence agencies are reluctant to be seen to interfere in the democratic process. But does he agree that steps must be taken to ensure that the proceeds of kleptocracy in countries like Russia are not used to infect democratic political parties in this country and elsewhere?
The right honourable gentleman speaks with great wisdom and authority on these matters and has huge experience of them. So I'll not detain the House any further and say, yes, I agree with him.
Right, we now come to topicals. Adam Jogi.
Question 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week's crime figures showed that shoplifting has increased by 30% in a year and street crime has gone up by 40% in a year, at a time when antisocial behaviour has become a serious challenge in some town centres, and yet the figures showed that neighbourhood policing figures are down by a further 28%. This is deeply damaging because communities need to feel safe and feel safe particularly at the heart of their communities. That is why this government is determined to restore neighbourhood policing, and I can set out that the new Crime and Policing Bill in the King's Speech will include strong measures to support neighbourhood policing and to give the police stronger powers to crack down on shoplifting and antisocial behaviour in order to keep our streets safe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Home Secretary for her answer. The people of Newcastle-under-Lyme raise crime and antisocial behaviour with me almost daily. That's why my constituents welcome the government's commitment to restoring meaningful and effective neighbourhood policing. So will the Home Secretary meet with me to discuss how Newcastle-under-Lyme can best benefit from this important step in the right direction?
I would say to him that I and the Policing Minister are very happy to talk to him about the importance of rebuilding neighbourhood policing in his constituency and also across the country, because fundamentally this is also about making communities feel safe and also restoring confidence in local communities, in policing and in community safety in their area.
Secretary James Cleverley.
The scrutiny of government can only work properly when ministers are open, honest and transparent. It is therefore disappointing that she has still failed to respond to my letter of the 10th of July. On her first outing... Well, if the Treasury bench don't believe that responding to opposition front bench letters matter, that's probably something they might want to take up with Mr. Speaker. On her first outing at the dispatch box, her statement was late, and in that statement, the Right Honourable Lady used figures which are still unpublished. Now, almost a week later, she has still not provided any published evidence whatsoever for the figures she used in that statement. But my question today is simple, and she still hasn't given an answer from the first time I raised it. Where is she going to send failed asylum seekers from Afghanistan, Syria and Iran?
Just order, one second. Can I just say to everybody, we are on topicals. Topicals are meant to be short and quick. Members aren't going to get in on either side, so please look to the front bench and others who've held us up. Home Secretary.
For the Shadow Home Secretary and former Home Secretary to talk about scrutiny and transparency when he failed to tell the House that he was spending £700 million over 2.5 years on sending 4 volunteers to Rwanda is just shocking. I would say to him, the problem with his policies is that he was not sending failed asylum seekers or asylum seekers anywhere. In fact, he sent more Home Secretaries to Rwanda than he sent asylum seekers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I say the use of e-bikes and e-scooters has become an increasing problem. In Sheffield city centre and pedestrian areas, they are a threat now to public safety, particularly when they're used by Deliveroo and other drivers. Guide dogs have issued a concern about the fact that people who are visually impaired can't hear these vehicles coming. Will the Minister now give clear guidance to the police about what action they should be taken to police these vehicles properly?
I totally sympathise with what the Honourable Gentleman has just set out. The police do have powers available to seize vehicles being used illegally or in an antisocial manner, and to fine individuals who fail to stop when instructed to do so. We will set out our plans to crack down on antisocial road users in due course.
Lib Dem spokesperson Jamie Stone.
Mr. Speaker, there's a crofter living in the Riconic and Lochbervie area of my constituency. He's very hard-working, he's well-liked, and he's done a great deal for the local community, but he's German, and he's trying ever so hard to get leave to remain, and it's taking forever. I wonder if the Minister were to ask her officials to meet with me to see how we could speed this on, I'd be very grateful, Mr. Speaker.
More than happy to meet the Honourable.
Honourable Edwards.
Mr. Speaker, last week a horrific incident took place in my constituency with the attack on uniformed Royal Engineer Lieutenant Colonel Mark Teaton on the streets of Brompton. Will my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, join me in paying tribute to Kent Police, ambulance and NHS workers, Medway Council and senior officers from the Brompton Barracks who worked so well together to quickly arrest the suspect, to save Mark's life, support his family and to reassure the local community?
Can I thank my honourable friend for raising this really important case? This was an awful attack on a soldier, serving soldier in her constituency. I think all of our thoughts will be with him, with his family and with his friends, wishing him a most speedy recovery. And we do give Kent Police our full support in investigating this incident and also in providing reassurance and community patrols in the area.
David Blundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents, Colin and Mandy Mackey, set up Spike Aware UK after their son Greg tragically died after having his drink spiked. So I very much welcome the fact that this government is bringing forward the proposals that the previous government had to outlaw spiking. But does the Home Secretary agree with me that the fight against spiking needs to be UK-wide? And will she encourage the Scottish Government to join with her in banning spiking across the UK?
Well, the honourable member makes an important point because spiking is a terrible crime. It's extremely dangerous and too often is not taken seriously enough. We will work with anyone and everyone to tackle this appalling crime, to make sure that more work is done to prevent spiking in the first place, but also that when it does take place, that the perpetrators feel the full force of the law.
Ben Goldsborough.
Speaker, under the Conservatives, rural crime rocketed by 22%, costing our economy an estimated £49.5 million. They're NFU figures, so you can question them if you're not convinced by them. What action is the Minister going to be taking to ensure that this Tory mess is sorted and that our country lanes are protected from crimes such as heating oil theft, machinery theft and also livestock theft?
The Government recognises the importance of tackling rural crime. We're committed to safeguarding rural communities with tougher measures to clamp down on antisocial behaviour, strengthen neighbourhood policing and stronger laws to prevent farm theft and fly tippers. And the National Rural Crime Unit provides police forces with specialist operational support in respect of the theft of farming or construction machinery, livestock theft, fly tipping, fuel theft and equine crime.
Sir David Davis.
In December 2023, a plot was exposed in which members of the Islamic Revolutionary Corps planned to assassinate two journalists working for Iran International on UK soil. Since 2022, January 2022, there have been about 15 such incidents happen in Britain. Is it not now time to ban the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps?
Well, the Right Honourable Gentleman has a very long-standing interest in these matters, so he knows that we don't comment on whether an organisation is or is not being considered for proscription. What is clear is that Iran's malign activity, including the activities of the IRGC, are completely unacceptable, and I can give him an assurance that we keep these matters under very close review.
Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the communities in my constituency mourning the loss of a young person to knife crime, the government's commitment to ban zombie knives, machetes and ninja swords cannot come soon enough. Can the Home Secretary confirm that in bringing forward this vital legislation, she will ensure that the penalties for selling these weapons illegally will be substantial and that they will apply personally to executives at the highest level in any retail outlet, including online marketplaces such as eBay and Amazon?
Well, the Government has a manifesto commitment to ban ninja swords and other weapons and will be taking this forward as soon as possible. And I hear very carefully what the honourable member has said. And ensuring that lethal blades which have been used to kill teenagers on our streets are no longer available to buy or sell is a key priority. And we will also be implementing the ban on zombie knives and zombie-style machetes, which was approved by Parliament in April.
Calder, Daniel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Government has rightly scrapped the Rwanda scheme, but the UK is falling behind our international counterparts in providing safe routes for refugees. We are now one of the only countries in Europe where refugee children in the UK cannot sponsor their family members to join them. Organisations like the Refugee Council have documented the harm this causes. Will the Home Secretary please confirm that the Government's mission to improve opportunity for all extends to refugee children and will amend the immigration rules accordingly?
I think most people in this country want to see strong border security and also a properly controlled and managed asylum system where we do our bit for those who have fled persecution and conflict, but also where those who have no right to be here are returned. We don't have any of those things at the moment. That's why we are strengthening our border security. It's why we continue to support important routes like Homes for Ukraine and the support for Afghanistan as well.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. In Tooting Town Centre, we have had a fantastic Operation Kenny rolled out this year, which has been absolutely fantastic in tackling violent crime and making people feel safer. That has meant more police patrolling the streets on a continuous basis and has led to a 70% reduction in crime. We would like to see this rolled out more across the country. So can I invite the Home Secretary to meet with me, or can I tempt her to come to Tooting and see this fantastic programme being rolled out and the fantastic effects that it has?
Well, I would like to thank my honourable friend for highlighting that important work that's going on the streets of London, and we want to make sure that policing has the support they need from central government. So I'm sure that the Home Secretary or myself would very much enjoy a visit to see this in action.
Robin Moore.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Unfortunately, within certain parts of Keighley, namely Bracken Bank, Guardhouse, Braithwaite and in other areas, residents are constantly being plagued by selfish individuals who ride motorbikes at high speeds, doing wheelies, wearing balaclavas, revving their engines, who have no regard for their fellow road users or indeed neighbouring residents who are quite rightly fed up. Can the Home Secretary outline her plans to deal with this increasing problem?
So I agree with the honourable member that the problems we've seen with off-road bikes, the deafening and distressing harassment that sometimes they can cause is a serious problem. But that's why this government is determined to strengthen the law on off-road bikes, to give the police more powers and to put more police on the street. I hope that his party will support it now.
Chris Webb.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In my hometown of Blackpool, knife crime has risen 416% since 2015-16. When I met with young people in Blackpool a few weeks ago, they told me it's now the norm that young people across my town carry a knife. Will the Secretary of State agree to meet with me to discuss this matter urgently and address this issue in Blackpool?
My honourable friend is right that we have seen really deeply damaging increases in knife crime. That is why we are making it part of our mission on crime to halve knife crime over the next 10 years. That has to involve stronger action on knife crime sales, stronger action in the law, and also stronger prevention with the new Young Futures programme.
Chamberlain.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Seasonal Agricultural Workers Scheme remains absolutely vital for farmers, largely due to the piecemeal nature of its running by the last government, which means that farmers haven't been able to make the investment decisions that they want to. So will the Home Secretary commit now to a scheme for the whole of this Parliament to provide that certainty to farmers and workers?
The honourable member will know that the Migration Advisory Committee has recently produced a report on the seasonal worker scheme. That report has been kept under review and we will update the House in due course.
Lord Session-Lurby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I had the pleasure of visiting the Metropolitan Police Special Operations Unit in my constituency with the new policing minister on Saturday, and we discussed a range of issues with the officers, from counter-terrorism, dealing with violent crime, protests and serious anti-social behaviour. Does the Home Secretary agree with me that with additional resources needed for our police officers, we need them and we need that urgent action to work with the Met to keep our streets safe in London?
Well, it was a great pleasure to be on that visit with the local constituency MP, and of course funding around the police settlement is something that we will be considering in the weeks and months ahead.
Final question, Dr Kieran Mullen.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. A few days ago, the Home Office published a notice about the use of the North Eye Detention Centre in my constituency, telling residents very little, except no decision had been made. As a matter of urgency, can the Home Office publish what options it's considering for its use and commit to a timetable for telling residents when it will be coming to at least a provisional decision that I and my constituents can feed into?
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. This site was purchased by the former government. I understand the uncertainty that's been caused by it, especially in the local community, and they will want to know the Home Office plans for the site. A decision will be made on the use of the North Eye site at the earliest opportunity, and I will keep him informed.
Right, we'll let the front benches change over.